Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar event. My name is Joshua. I'm going to be your presenter today. It is promptly 1 p.m. Eastern Time here. We're going to go ahead and get started. We have a very robust or very busy topic to talk about today, so we're going to try to get through the introduction here as quickly as we can. Click the little red arrow on the sidebar of your webinar control panel to minimize that. If you've got a single monitor setup, it allows you to get the full visual effect of the presentation. Drag it off to your second desktop, if you've got a dual monitor setup. We're here until about 1:20 Eastern Time. I'm going to try my best to get through this material in 20 minutes, folks, but it's about 15 pages worth of material in the workbook, and it may go a little long. Just always be aware that if you have to dive out and we're not quite wrapped up at that 20 minutes, the video or recording of today's webinar event will be available on our support or resource center page here sometime in the next day or two for you to revisit later if you need to. The topic is taken from our D104 donations workbook, pages 15 to 30. So that is what I'm using as the printed material. If you have that workbook, you may want to follow along since that's what I'm using. If you do not have the workbooks, those of course can be purchased from the training page on our website. Those downloadable documents are affordable, and you can download and follow along with the workbooks wherever the training webinars or these webinars do use those as the basis. Questions, please type those into the questions portion of the webinar control panel. I will do my best to keep an eye on those. Based on the complexity and the detail of our topic today, I probably will only be able to get to them at the very end, but I will stop, we'll try to get to all of those questions at the very end. Please keep the questions on our Browse Donations topic. There may be another webinar event that's better suited for your other questions that you have, or of course, our support technicians. You can contact us through 6 p.m. Eastern Time today if you have more specific questions. Okay, let's move right into the topic. Browse donations. What we're talking about here is browse donations right here in the bottom, in the middle of our page where it says browse, or you can go to donations and browse in the top left. Either way to get to that page. But essentially, as the page 15 talks about, browse donations screen is the history of all transactions entered in the donations module. Okay. One of the things I like to point out is that by default, it is always the donation transactions that are based on the particular date that we're looking at here, or right here, donation date of 1/1 through 12/31 of 2022. I can, of course, go back to my change dates filter and sort and change the date of those transactions to virtually any date I wish to look at, okay? So when we want to look at donations for a particular giver, we're going to go to this giver menu right up here in the upper left. Let me get up my highlighter right here, the giver menu. So when I start typing the name of the person that I'm looking for, so let's say Parks, there's there I'm looking for 29, in this case Donna Parks. When I choose that or choose it from the menu, sorry, let me go back up there and do that. I wanted to make sure I understood what I was looking for. I can type either name or number, whatever I'm looking for. So we look right here, we've got Mr. and Mrs. Craig Parks. It now, when I hit enter on that, it now reveals the giving total right here with all of their giving transactions for the date range that I've entered or requested, okay? So as the, on page 16, it kind of shows a different giver, but essentially shows the same information, shows all of Donna's giving in 2022 to this point in the year, okay? To correct the donations, if I simply can find the particular transaction I'm wanting to work with, I simply highlight my transaction. I can click simply the correct button up here at the top. Let me get out my highlighter and draw a little focus here. So right here I've got my correct, or to the right of that my reverse, or my print donations, and we're going to try to take a few seconds here or minutes to look at all of those options later on. But when I want to correct a transaction, let's say I highlight my organ rebuilding campaign transaction right here. I want to correct it. I simply go to the correct button at the top of the page. You can enter either number or name, okay, to search in that giver menu. If you don't use envelope numbers or giver numbers, then you have to search by name, but either one works, okay? When I've selected the particular transaction that I want to correct, I can simply highlight it. You have to drill down, folks, and actually highlight the transaction that I'm wanting. A lot of folks on my support calls, if they click on here, the giver at the top, Donna, notice now that my correct or reverse in NSF is unavailable. I have to choose a specific transaction in order to be able to post that correction. So let's say I choose the one on January 30th for 35. Now I can click the correct button at the top of the page, and it opens up my correct donation window. Folks, anything about this transaction can be corrected. Okay, anything about it. The date, the giver, the amount, the account, anything we want. Okay? So let's say in this particular case, Donna didn't intend her giving to go to the Oregon Rebuilding Campaign. She wanted it to go to a different account. Okay, so I can either just clear that out and choose it, or I can simply click the down arrow and I can swap out that account if I wish. Okay, the choice is mine. I have multiple ways that I can do this. Okay, so rather than going to the Oregon Rebuilding Campaign, she wanted it just to go to Oregon. I can change that and simply click Save Donations or Save and Transfer if those giving accounts are linked to different accounts, which they probably would be. So I would probably want to click Save and Transfer if I'm wanting, if this was the only transaction that I'm wanting to make. But for the purposes of our webinar, we're just going to choose Save. So it does pop up now and say the dialog box in the middle of 17, your corrections required that the transaction be reversed and re-entered, and here is our new transaction number. We're going to click OK on that, and we now notice it still shows Donna's giving for the year, but now notice that the giving account now shows 105 instead of the Oregon Rebuilding Campaign. Okay, so just an FYI, that's how that's going to display differently, is it's going to show differently right here, whatever my changes were, whether it was the date, but if the giver was different, it might no longer show here if I've requested for a specific giver. Okay, we're going to come back to the transfer donations option here in just a second. Okay, it does note in the middle of page 18, you will need to decide if the changes that you're making in donations should be transferred into the accounting module or not. Okay, there are a lot of factors that we need to factor into when determining whether the donations need to be transferred into accounting. Most of all, date and time. Okay, so if this was a transaction from back in 2021, maybe the church considers that year closed, but I need to fix it for, say, the giver's donation statement. That may be a situation where I don't want to transfer the corrections into accounting. Folks, it's really important to understand that there's no requirement to transfer anything from donations into accounting. The software does not require it, okay? Like in this particular case, this is a January 30th transaction that maybe we would want to transfer it, maybe we wouldn't. I could just as easily post a transaction in accounting that corrects that between the accounts if necessary. Maybe January's reconciled already and I don't want to create any problems with my bank reconciliation. Maybe reports have been distributed. I have to decide that, okay? There's no cut and dry answer for any of this. Page 18, reversing a donation transaction. If, say, the donation for Donna on that day had been entered into donations for her and it was a mistake, maybe I need to get rid of that, okay? So just like I would do a reversal or correction, I can also choose the highlight the transaction and click reverse, okay? So again, that's kind of going back to that in that dialog, in that box in the middle of page 19 or 2/3 the way down is, do I want to transfer the reversal into accounting? And if so, what am I going to be impacting? That's a really important question. So if, say, we want to reverse this transaction on January 30th, I would go up to reverse an NSF at the top. Okay. When we click on that, it now opens up our reverse donation window. For those of you that are familiar with accounting, you probably already are familiar with these types of screens. The date occurred from the original date of the transaction. We typically strongly recommend that you always use this original date. Okay. You can also then enter any comments if you want. on here, okay, which again, if you're wanting it for internal purposes, the giver's never going to see these transactions. That's true whether you choose the reverse due to NSF or, non-sufficient funds or not, okay? But we do also have advanced options here, which is talking about, do we want it to reverse the donation on the giver's record with a different date, so today's date or some other date, okay? Notice here it says in the middle, under most circumstances, date occurred should not be changed. Dates changed may cause unexpected results. We strongly recommend, if at all possible, leaving it as the original date. And yes, I would put in any comments I'm wanting about that for reporting purposes, and if the check was insufficient, I would also check the reverse due to non-sufficient funds. We're going to go ahead and check that again because that's the topic that's on page 20 here, is talking about Nsf corrections. Again, when we check that box, the giver never sees anything about non-sufficient funds on their donation statement. It is only for internal purposes that we would be checking that, and if I want to see if that was the case. So just an important thing to understand, when a check is reversed in donations due to NSF status, I am definitely not going to transfer this into accounting. Why? Because it is going to I don't want it to show up as a deposit adjustment. It needs to show up as a withdrawal. We're not going to get into that detail, but there is, if you go out to the Resource Center page, a specific document and video on dealing with NSF donation entries, okay? And you'll want to look at that if you're dealing with NSF situations, okay? But if I were to transfer this into accounting, it would show up as a negative amount on my deposits, and that's not how it would reflect on my bank statement. So I'm not going to transfer this in there, but I'm going to click OK on this. I'm leaving it as the original date. It asked, are you sure you want to reverse it? We click yes, and it says it's now been reversed, okay? Now Donna's not going to see that $35 entry on her giving statement at all, okay? All right. It's now gone from her, and now I would have to deal with, whatever I was wanting to do in terms of fixing my accounting, accounting here, the way that I would want to fix that. Page 21 talks about using donations, change dates, filter, and sort. And what it's talking about here, folks, is this right up here, this button right up here in the upper left corner. This is where really the power in this window can be harnessed. So, when we click on that, it's hanging on to my Donna Parks record here because that's what I had selected. But if I click that to clear that out, notice it brings everybody back. But if I go to change dates, filter, and sort, this is, for all intents and purposes, folks, a query builder. You can enter queries here. So it talks about on 21 the filter tab. So it defaults in this case to 2022, but if I want to go back and look at my giving for, say, 2021, I'm just going to change my date occurred right here to the date range or the date that I'm wanting to look at. So once I change from and to 21 and click OK, I'm now looking at all of my giving transactions for 2021, okay? But you can enter a combination of criteria here, okay? You can choose a giver. You can look for information as it pertains to a specific account. Okay, so, I want to see how much folks gave to Flowers in 2021. I can choose the account of Flowers, edit my date, click OK. Here's all of my people that gave to Flowers last year. I can print a donation report from here, or whatever I need to do. But you can enter a combination of criteria or information on this page. You can look for a specific check or reference number, okay, or donation transactions that were entered for a particular user, or giving that was posted to using a particular batch code, maybe a specific payment method, okay? Lots and lots. For those of you that are familiar with this type of feature in the browse transactions in accounting, there's a lot you can do with this, okay? We're not going to spend a whole lot of time with it, okay, because again, we're kind of running short on time. But I encourage each and every one of you to dive into this change dates, filter, and sort and see what you can do with it, okay? You can save selections as default on this window. So if you have a particular layout that you like that is different from somebody else, you can simply make your selections here, click check Save Selections as default and click OK, and this will be your view based on your church Windows logon, no one else's, okay? So the thing I want to talk about here is you can, over on the right, you can choose a particular envelope number range, date posted. You have no power, folks, over the date posted. The church Windows assigns the date posted to every transaction or batch based on the date that you're sitting at the computer. So if you go, well, I know I was sitting at the computer on this date, I want to see what I posted in donations, you can absolutely put in date posted and it'll show you everything that was posted with the date posted of that day. A particular transaction number, a range of transaction numbers. Donation transactions with a specific amount. Lots and lots of power here. And this is just on the filter tab, okay? It's something that I think everybody should kind of dive in and play with. There's really nothing you can do to break this, okay? If you go, okay, I want to reset everything, you can just go down to clear filter down here in the bottom right, and it'll just reset everything back to the defaults. And then when I click OK through that, I'm back to looking at my 2022 giving transactions, okay? We can even see reverse transactions here. Down the right, left-hand side, we can do show reversed, and honestly, folks, this is new in 23, is we have the ability to show only reversed. This is true in accounting as well. Okay, this has now been updated on page 25 here under that show only reversed. This has only been added in version 23. Okay, another good reason to keep up with the software. Let's move across to our next tab, group and sort. This is a really, really powerful tab. Okay, by default, it wants to group and sort everything by giver. Okay. But if I want to change this, I can go, okay, I want to group it by, say, date occurred, donation date. And I want to group by field 1, and I simply, and I choose totals only, and I click OK. Now notice it shows all of my donations broken down by date. Okay? So I can click on, there, and if I want to print my donations, but it shows me how much I was given for each one of my giving dates in 2022. I can also do subsorts on that. So maybe within a subsort, I can choose, maybe let's do giver. Oh, can't do group by field on that, sorry. Can't do that. So totals only if I do donation date, and then within that giver, now when I click OK, notice we've got a plus sign next to there, and it will allow me to expand and see. Those totals only really kind of lock things down because we're basically saying we just want to see totals, we don't want to see detail. Okay? But a lot of power under group and sort as well. I use this on the log report all the time, folks, to be able to get output that I'm wanting on the report in a way that I or a user wants particularly. Okay? Columns. If you don't want to see all the columns as they're displayed on there, you can come in here and eliminate columns that you don't want to see, folks, or add ones you do. There's a whole lot of information fields that can be added or removed from the visible columns to display in the order that you're wanting. And what I mean by that is over here you control, which columns, you can move them back and forth, but over here on the far right, you've got the up and down arrows that then allows you to reorder the columns as they're displayed, and so top representing left margin, bottom being right margin. Okay, so there's a lot of customizability in this that you can set up for your particular logon that would be different than somebody else's. When you choose these and choose Save Selections as default, you're saving this for your logon, which is your logon to Church Windows, which is different from everybody else's. Okay. Fonts, of course, are how the fonts are displays. It's typically Times New Roman, but you can have the browse donations display with a different font with a different font size if you wish. And the additional options would be here, including membership category indicator or including a donations indicator as well. Not typically much you can do on that or would do with that per se, but you can. But it talks about those columns and reordering and playing with those columns tabs on page 28 into 29. The final thing we're going to talk about here on this, folks, and like I said, You can always reset the default by simply coming down here, down at the bottom left, and choosing Restore Default Layout, or you can do Restore Saved Layout, okay? But down here in the bottom left, you can do Clear Filter, and it will just reset the defaults back to that. It should have done that. Give me a second. Let me do Clear Filter over here, and let's try that. Why is that not doing that? I'm sorry, folks. Oh, Restore Default Layout. There it is. Sorry, my fault. So again, it's back to just Giver. What it's talking about there finally on page 21, 29, or 30, 29 into 30 is the Group and Sort Browse Donation screen. And what it's talking about there is right up here. While this defaults to Giver, you can basically pull this down and you can do subsorts. It says, notice it says drag a column header here to group by that column up to 3. So if I wanted to do, say, Giver, and then do a subsort of donation date, notice here that when I click on the plus sign next to somebody's name, it now breaks it down into the sub-donation sort for their transactions by those dates. So you can use drag and drop and do, sorts with subsorts up to 3 columns, 3 column headers, just simply by dragging those columns up to that. So if I drag down everything down, it's going to sort all of my donations by date occurred automatically, okay? Which basically it does January 2nd, shows all of my giving, then January 9th, all of my givers, subsorted, I think, by alphabetically within that. But if I want to, I could also pull up donation date, and there they are separated by those dates. This is in Browse in accounting as well, but you have lots and lots and lots of flexibility here, folks, for what this screen can get you and do for you, okay? And then from there, of course, we can go to a print donation report here from here based on what you have selected or viewed on the screen.